Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I am here to talk through all the books that I read in June. First of all, in the spirit of showing off my literary t-shirts, today I have Cultivate Empathy, Read. June was a pretty successful reading month for me, I think, and I'm going to divide this into two sections. Firstly is going to be my digital reads for the month, well, most of them. And then I'm going to dive into the books I read for the Historical Fiction Readathon, and then probably one more digital book, which was rather a surprise. So first up, my audiobook reads, the first part of my digital reads. And in the month of June, I finished both the first and the second books in the Finley Donovan series by El Cosimano. The first one is Finley Donovan is Killing It, and the second is Finley Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead. So I'm going to keep the picture of the first one up here, but do bear in mind I have read both. These were recommended to me by my friend Amanda, and I have to say I really enjoyed them. I'm going to tell you the premise before I tell you any more. They are about Finley Donovan, who is a recently divorced young mother who is also a writer, and she is a hot mess express. And one day she is sitting in a local restaurant talking to her agent about how she's not sure how to wrap up this book and how to kill off this particular character. And then when her agent leaves, another woman in the restaurant approaches her who overheard them, and this woman thinks that Finley is in fact a contract killer and hires her to kill her husband and won't take no for an answer. And things spiral way out of Finley's control from there. These books become absolutely ludicrous to the point where I wasn't going to continue. But then they do actually wrap up nicely and then end on such a spectacular cliffhanger that I had to listen to book two. El Cosimano knows that formula works well because book two did very much the same thing. You do grow to love these characters. I always think I know where the mystery's going to go, and then a twist comes out of left field that I did not see coming. And they're just incredibly enjoyable and funny, and I highly recommend them. There are 3 more in the series. I have the next 2 on hold, so I'll let you know about them when I finally get to listen. In between waiting for those audiobooks to come in, because I could see on the library app that I was close to getting them, I decided to listen to the first 2 Harry Potter books in between, because those I wouldn't mind leaving halfway through. I've never used them as a sleep aid. I've never heard Stephen Fry read them, and I'm very jealous of any British children who grew up listening to him. And so I've been meaning to reread them for a while. So I thought I would be able to put them down 3/4 of the way through, listen to my library audiobook, and then come back to them easily. And that's all I'm going to say about them there, because you've heard my feelings about J.K. Rowling already. But I do still love the stories and everything that they stand for, and I think that's way more important. I also had one DNF towards the beginning of the month, and that was the Marriage Monitoring Aunties Association by Ola Awonubi. I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. And that's not to say that this book was bad. It just wasn't for me in the place that I'm in my life right now. This is about a woman in her 40s or 50s, I want to say 50s, but I also really don't want to be wrong, who is very successful in her career, and she's quite proud of that, but has had terrible luck dating, and is facing a lot of pressure from her Nigerian family, especially her mother, to get married. And I got about 20% of the way in, and I just couldn't do it, because still being single in my 30s, it was pressing a lot of buttons for me. So it's wonderfully written, and I think it's a really important story to tell. It just wasn't for me and where I am right now. Then for the Historical Fiction Readathon, the first book I finished was Fagan the Thief by Alison Epstein. This is a retelling of Fagan's life, Fagan the character from Oliver Twist. And I say a retelling of his life because not only does it give his backstory of what it would have been like growing up Jewish in the late 18th, early 19th century, specifically what his life was like within the community, why he would have left the community, how he fell in with Bill Sykes and Nancy, and how he started taking in these pickpocket boys. That part I found really interesting, and she writes wonderfully. So all of that was really working for me. Towards the end, however, I started to have a crisis where I thought that I had completely forgotten how Oliver Twist ends. Because I'm reading a lot and I'm not remembering anything that's happening in this novel. Well, I got to the afterword and it turns out that she did in fact change elements of the ending. And that made me feel a lot better, but I spent a good 25% of the book questioning my sanity, which was not fun. So I wish that had been said from the get-go. I understand why she did, and I understand how it fits in with her wanting to tell Fagan's story and reframe it. Fagan's portrayal is famously pretty anti-Semitic, but on the other hand, changing what happens to him, and especially to Bill and to Nancy, really undercuts the tragedy of it, because I never read the end of Oliver Twist thinking that any of the three of them deserved what they got, especially not Fagan. So I think undercutting that tragic element really weakened the story for me. Again, I understand why she chose to, but it just didn't work for me. The first 3/4, however, very well worth a read. Then I read One Enchanted Evening by Anton Dubek, and I was expecting this to be a fun historical romp. It's advertised as Downton Abbey meets ballroom dancing, although it is set in the 1930s, so slightly later than Downton, but nonetheless. And it starts out exactly that way. You have this grand London hotel, young girl from the country goes there to be a chambermaid. You have the glamorous dancer who's employed to work its ballrooms, so that aspect actually becomes a lot like Dirty Dancing. And I thought, oh, this is going to be fun and light, and then the drama hits. And the historical and political details that Anton Dubek includes are stunningly hard-hitting. There is fantastically realistic depiction of drug addiction, of the anti-Semitism that was present in the UK, the amount of the British high class who really didn't see anything wrong with the fascist movement. And that just takes this story to a whole new level, confronting all of those evils, such that my mother and I both finished this book, and she immediately asked me to buy the next 2 books. So we've classed that as a household expense since we'll both be reading them. So yes, really, really loved these. Highly recommend this whole series, and I can't wait for the next 2 to come in. Then I also read and loved The Agency for Scandal by Laura Wood. I've loved many of Laura Wood's books. You can see some of them here, some of them I've read as ARCs, and I was really looking forward to this series, and it did not disappoint. This follows a young woman who is part of a group of young women who all work for the Aviary, run by Mrs. Finch. And she uses all of these young women to infiltrate the upper classes and find out these dark secrets that rich, powerful men hold. And they then use this information to somehow undercut whatever plans these men have. So our heroine Izzy is part of this group, and the mystery is incredibly gripping. The romance that develops, the several romances that develop, are really beautifully done. The characters are fabulously drawn. I loved it. I loved it. I cannot wait to read the other 2 books in this series, which I would assume are going to follow some of the other girls in this series. I'm not sure, don't quote me on that, but I think that's what they're going to do. Then I finished Learned by Heart by Emma Donoghue. This was a fantastic novel. As you can tell, I've read some of Emma Donoghue's other work, and this one did not disappoint either. This is a novel about Anne Lister, who I've spoken about at length on this channel, but suffice it to say she was a relatively open lesbian in York in the 1830s. However, this book is set slightly earlier. It's set in the Regency itself because it follows Anne's first relationship, at least the first relationship that we know about, with Eliza Raine when they were both at school. And it's told from Eliza's perspective. And this actually filled the dual timeline prompt as well, because we keep flipping back and forth. We're getting letters that Eliza is writing to Anne much later when we know she was committed to a mental hospital. And then we get flashbacks of how they met, how their relationship grew and developed, and how we came to this point. And it is, of course, beautifully written. Emma Donoghue is a masterful writer. The pacing is amazing. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was slightly nervous because I didn't know what tone it was going to take, but it hit the sweet spot and it was really lovely. I highly recommend this one as well. By the way, I apologize if you can hear all of those crows. Our yard seems to be full of them and there's nothing we can do about it for several days. So then finally I read 1536 by Ava Pickett, which is a play about a particular event. This looks at Henry VIII's arrest and sentencing and execution of Anne Boleyn in the year 1536 through the eyes of 3 everyday women, and how his actions begin to influence the way the men in their lives view women, and then how it affects them and how it changes their lives. This was chilling. It was fantastically done. I could hear all of these women's voices so clearly. If you're not used to reading plays, I would definitely say try and hear someone else read it aloud, because it's sometimes there is no punctuation, and that's to indicate pacing, the pace at which the person would speak the line. And it took me a second to get used to, but once you learn how to read that, it is incredibly effective. And I wish that this would come to the States. I think we definitely need it in the States, but I think it was a fairly small production in London as it was, so I don't think that that's going to happen, which is why I ordered it. But if you are at all interested in the Tudors, even if you're not interested in the Tudors, if you're just interested in feminist history and feminist commentary, read this play. It was stunning. One of the lines that stuck with me most from the very end, and it surprisingly doesn't ruin anything, is Anna yelling, "I will be good, I promise I will be good," and her friend saying, "How can you be when they keep changing what it means?" And this play is full of powerful moments like that that will stick in my head for a very long time. However, a lot of those historical fiction books were really quite heavy, especially in a news-heavy month. So to lighten the mood, I managed to borrow the romance novel Whiskey Business from the library. And this is a series by Elliot Fletcher. I actually got the arc of the second book, and I'm currently reading that, so that will be in my July wrap-up. But I had heard about this from Jean of Jean Mingus, and I knew that she really enjoyed it. And to get that kind of compliment from a Scottish person about a Scottish-based romance is a high praise indeed. So of course I picked it up, and this was such fun. This follows April, a former actress, and I say former because she's not sure if she's going to go back to it as a career, but she is driving back to the Isle of Skye to visit her grandparents' home. Her grandfather passed very suddenly. She didn't know that he was ill, And so she's going back to look after the house, piece her life together, and figure out what happens next. Meanwhile, the house and the distillery business attached to it have been in the hands of Malcolm McCabe, one of 3 McCabe brothers on the island. And he and April grew up together, but now they are faced with one another once again. This book is just, it's a contemporary romance. You can see where it's going to go. It's a grumpy sunshine romance. It is very definitely spicy, if that matters to you. There's also dementia representation, anxiety representation, the effects of social media, online bullying, along with 2 very cute dogs, and the most delightful collection of family and friends. It really does have a community feel. Making it extra fun is the fact that Elliot Fletcher designed a playlist to go along with this book and has designed certain songs to go with each chapter. And she lists them at the front of the book, and you can also find those playlists on Spotify. That was a lot of fun. I had such a fun time listening to those songs with each chapter, although it was harder to manage on my phone for some reason. I don't know why, but I am definitely enjoying book 2 as well, and I will let you know how I enjoy that specifically in my July wrap-up, so be on the lookout for that. So those were all of the books that I read in June. Let me know down below if you have further questions about each of these, if you also have thoughts and feelings about any of them, or if you read a book this month, or if you read a book in general that you think I would really love based on the books that I loved this month. Let me know down below. I always love hearing from you, and until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.